you all, for anyone who's in the chat, for joining us tonight for Mississippi Today's voter event. I'm Kayleigh Skinner. I'm the managing editor of Mississippi Today, and I'm here tonight with Bobby Harrison and Geoff Pender, who are two of our political reporters at Mississippi Today. And before we get into the meat of why we're here tonight, I just wanted to kind of give a super quick overview of Mississippi Today. If maybe you're not familiar with us, we're a nonprofit newsroom. We launched in March 2016, and we cover government policy and politics, everything from health to education to what the legislature is doing, because our goal is to keep Mississippians informed. And so we do that obviously with news stories, but also like deliverable items, kind of like our voter guide or even events like tonight. And we would have loved for this to be an in-person event, but 2020 has had different plans for that. So again, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. And so I wanted to give Bobby and Geoff the chance to introduce themselves.
Since I'm older, I'll go first. I'm Bobby Harrison. I've been at Mississippi Today since the summer of 2018. I think my official title is senior capital reporter, and Geoff's official title is senior political reporter, which just proves that we're both old.
Senior.
Yeah, and I've been in journalism, working for newspapers, and now in digital journalism for just about all of my adult life. I worked in Tupelo for most of that time with the Daily Journal, covered state politics and state government here in Jackson while working for the Daily Journal for much of that time. I also worked as a sports writer and sports editor and news editor, so I've done a little bit of everything throughout my career in journalism.
Geoff Pender, been at Mississippi Today since the middle of June. Happy to be here. Like Bobby, I've done a little bit of everything in the Mississippi journalism world, from local politics, worked for several publications in the state, but primarily covered politics, government, legislature for many years. Very similar background to Bobby, and I'm also senior. I've been, I guess, doing this about 30 years, a little more at this point. And what did you tell me I am? Senior political? And no.
Yeah, you're right. That's
okay. Senior political, but we're both senior. Bobby's a little more senior than me, but not by much.
That's true.
Again, very happy to be here, and welcome everyone watching tonight. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, so both of them obviously seniors in their title. They know a lot about Mississippi politics. So the way that this is going to work tonight is that Bobby and Geoff are going to kind of talk and give an overview of this election, which now, as of tonight, is 2 months from today. And we are going to do some questions towards the end. So if, as they're talking, you have a question, feel free to drop it in the Q&A, preferably the Q&A or the chat. I'll be monitoring both. And then we will, later in the program, open it up for questions. So just to start very broadly, I mean, Bobby or Geoff, what are we going to be voting on in November?
Geoff, you want? Go ahead.
Doesn't matter. We've got obviously top of the ticket presidential. I think most folks realize that. Top of the ticket, as far as our state, is a U.S. Senate race. It's a rematch between the incumbent Republican Cindy Hyde-Smith and Democratic former U.S. Representative Mike Espy. They also ran against each other in a 2018 special election. We've got a couple of, we've got actually three, I think, contested. Am I right, Bobby? Three contested.
That's right.
U.S. House races contested, and at least a couple of cases might be putting it a little strongly. They're not considered super competitive, but they are contested. Then we've got two state Supreme Court races. Also, you've got beyond that, we've got three big ballot initiatives. We've got medical marijuana, two choices on that initiative, basically. Then we've got help me out, Bobby.
Okay, well,
then we've got the flag, of course. That's whether straight up and down vote for adopting the flag, and then we've got a third ballot initiative on a voter issue, which Bobby has covered extensively, and might want to encapsulate that for us.
Yeah, that's why I'll jump in right there with that. It's kind of a real sort of inside baseball type thing, but it's actually pretty important. The state's 1890s Constitution still has a provision that requires a candidate for statewide office to receive not only a majority of the vote, but also the most votes in the majority of the House districts. If the candidate doesn't do that, then the election goes to the House to decide kind of some people call it a junior electoral college. And what the result could have been, say, for instance, that Jim Hood had won. He didn't win, of course, but he had won the governor's race in 2019, but he didn't win a majority vote. He didn't win the majority of House districts. He would have gone to a Republican-dominated House to decide that election. So that probably would have given the Republican candidate, Tate Reeves, a huge advantage. That was put in the Constitution in the 1890s. I mean, it was no secret. It's put, in the 1890s, African Americans were a majority population in this state, and the framers of the 1890s Constitution wanted to ensure that Black Mississippians were not elected to statewide office, so they put that provision in there because they knew the way they drew the House districts, white Mississippians would always control the House. So they put that in there as a safeguard to make sure there was no African American elected to statewide office. So I actually think, I know it's kind of a inside and detailed type of thing. It was hard for a lot of people to understand, but I think it's a big deal for the state of Mississippi that this might actually be removed from the Constitution. Now, of course, it's being removed because the federal judge said, if you don't remove it, Mississippi, I'm going to probably remove it. So the states had a little help and decided to get in this direction, but I still think it's an important issue.
That process has come into play, right, Bobby? At least once, or is it twice?
No, actually, Geoff, it was 3 times in the 1990s. Yeah, in 91 in the lieutenant governor's election,
right.
And in 95 in lieutenant governor's election. And of course, the most famous in both those instances, a losing candidate opted not to try to go to the House to have to win the election. But of course, in 99, Parker, the Republican candidate for governor, lost the election, but he didn't. But Ronnie Musgrove, the Democrat, did not have a majority vote. He had a plurality. He won a plurality, and then as far as the House districts, each candidate won 61 of the House districts. So by the definition of the Constitution, it meant the election could be Parker could challenge the election in the House, which he did. Musgrove won in the House. It was majority Democrats at the time, but they also was, they said it was the right thing to do to elect the candidate who had the most votes. So that's
the upshot is we've got an old Jim Crow era law in the books that voters have a chance to.
That's right.
Get rid of before a judge forces the state to get rid of.
Yeah, it was part of the same Constitution, part of the same Jim Crow laws that had separate, but and in quote separate equal school districts, had poll taxes and literacy tests and all sorts of other things that were needed to be able to vote. All those things have been removed from the Constitution through the years, mainly by being forced to by the U.S. courts, but at the same token, this particular provision has remained. So its days are most likely numbered. I guess it will pass the referendum to remove it in November. I'll be surprised if it doesn't.
Well, while we're on the topic of ballot initiatives, I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about the flag. Obviously there was some big news with that this week. I think the big thing that a lot of people maybe don't know or maybe want to understand is what exactly is going to be and what happens if the flag that has been presented to voters, they don't like it. What happens if they vote no?
Sure. The provision the legislature passed is that an appointed commission, which they just did this week, adopts a proposed new flag, and voters get an up or down vote on it. If it is rejected, the law states that they go back, the same commission goes back to the drawing board, comes up with another design, presents it to voters again next year. So, I guess we could see rinse and repeat on the flag for a while. That's one of those votes that's, I think, hard to handicap right now. But I would guess chances are we're going to get the flag approved. Well, I say that handicapping and guessing anything in 2020, political or otherwise, is difficult to do. So.
But until voters give that upvote and choose a flag, we will not have a state flag.
We do not have one. The old one, the 126-year-old flag with the Confederate battle emblem was removed.
Retired.
The legislature retired to a museum.
Yeah, we're kind of like the Washington football team. The Washington football team doesn't have a mascot, and we don't have a flag.
Yep.
Yeah. And of course, there's 3 ballot provisions. The third one is medical marijuana, and that seems like a whole can of worms. Bobby, what are people voting on when it comes to that?
Okay, there's a citizen-sponsored initiative on the ballot that would approve medical marijuana, and it was placed on the ballot by through the initiative process. You had to have more than 100,000 signatures of registered voters, divided pretty much equally among 5 House congressional districts. Now, this past session, way back in this session is still ongoing, but way back in January or February, I can't remember when it was, the House, the legislature placed an alternative on the ballot to go along with the citizen-sponsored initiative. And the difference is that the citizen-sponsored initiative is kind of wide open. There's not as many regulations. The legislative alternative, there's more regulations. Of course, the sponsors of the citizen-sponsored initiative say it was placed, the legislature placed the medical marijuana alternative on the ballot just to confuse voters, to try to ensure the defeat of both. So that's what happened back a few years ago with, what was it, Initiative 42, that was an education initiative. That time, the legislature also placed an alternative on the ballot, and the end result, both were defeated. But so this is kind of this is going to be a tricky thing to navigate for voters. I wrote a piece this past weekend. Our initiative process, I think, is flawed for a number of reasons. One of the ways it's flawed, the only way you can do an initiative, it puts an issue in the Constitution. And I just think putting medical marijuana or any other drug in the Constitution is kind of the wrong way to go. So some people who might support medical marijuana might think, well, if this goes in the Constitution, it's kind of there forever, and it makes it harder to change. So there could be an instance where some people will support medical marijuana, but may vote against this because it's in the Constitution. I don't know if that happens or not, but we'll see.
Yeah, there's several groups out lobbying pretty hard against the citizen initiative. Bobby, some of the things they raise do seem to pose some problems. You mentioned putting it in the Constitution is one thing, but also some other major issues with the Department of Health will become a taxing agency, and whatever money they collect from this has to stay there. It can't go into anywhere else in government. What all have you heard about some of the issues or potential problems with either initiative?
Yeah, well, on the citizen-sponsored initiative, that is the Department of Health issue, which the Department of Health, as the Board of Health, which oversees the Department of Health, has
opposes it.
Put out a statement saying they oppose it. And I mean, but it kind of takes all of the authority away from the legislature to regulate marijuana, which, you say what you want to about the legislature. They are elected by the citizens, and that's kind of their job, is to make laws of those sorts. But it kind of takes their authority away to do that. And some people argue that the citizen-sponsored initiative allows for, how do you say this, too large a volume of marijuana to be dispensed to people.
And the people opposing it most vocally, I talked with some of them just in recent days and weeks, and one of their things is the way it's phrased. It will allow just wide open dispensaries basically everywhere. They claim it's modeled after in Oklahoma. That part of the initiative is modeled after Oklahoma's law, which they claim Oklahoma has 3,900 marijuana dispensaries now, more than California.
One on every block.
They fear Mississippi would see one on every block. They claim that there are just not enough regulations in it. But then on the other hand, too, I've heard, and I think you addressed this in a story in recent days, is that it's almost like the legislative initiative.
It's too restrictive.
Wouldn't allow medical. It would technically legalize it, but wouldn't allow there to really be any medical marijuana use. So.
Well, I mean, and I'm far from expert on this, but one thing that the people who oppose the legislative initiative complain about is that it would prohibit the smoking of medical marijuana, except in very extreme cases when people were real sick. And I mean, and there's an argument that, the most efficient way to, like I said, I'm far from expert on this, but there's an argument that the most efficient way to ingest marijuana is through smoking. And so that's one of the complaints you hear against the legislative initiative, a legislative alternative.
Otherwise, I mean, what polling we've seen would indicate allowing medical marijuana is a very popular idea with voters, correct?
Yeah.
I think there's supposedly a new poll out this week that shows overwhelming. Complex issue. I think your story broached, okay, if this is so muddied with the dueling initiatives or whatever, we have a strong likelihood neither will pass. What's that going to mean for medical marijuana down the road?
Yeah, and I contend in that story, Geoff, that the legislature's trying to kind of drop the ball on this issue. What they should have done, because there's been polling around for a couple of years now showing the popularity of medical marijuana and how people support it. What they should have done is pass a general law, just like they do with alcohol or cigarettes or multiple other drugs, to legalize it under reasonable regulation and put it on the general law books and not in the Constitution, where when something goes in the Constitution, it's hard to change. It takes another vote of the people to change it, so it's a long and complex process. So I think the legislature kind of dropped the ball on this issue. There was some talk of trying to do that this year, but then COVID-19 hit and a lot of things got pushed to the back burner, and it just didn't happen.
They still have 2 days on the books, right? You think?
Yeah, they got 2 days.
Could swoop in and pass that in 2 days.
Yeah. Well, it'd take a 2/3 vote at this point in time, but they passed the flag change in 2 days once they got around to voting. So who knows?
Yeah. Well, to pivot again, speaking of COVID-19, that's obviously affecting elections and like the way people want to vote or maybe are scared of going to the polls. I'm curious, what are the rules right now on the books in Mississippi about voting by mail? And I wonder if the legislature has done anything to address that or discussed it all.
A lot of people say they haven't done enough to address that. A lot of states have made it much to the President Trump's chagrin in some cases. He's complained about it, but a lot of states have taken steps to make it much easier to vote this year. A lot of states are actually mailing out ballot applications so people can then return that ballot application, get an application of a ballot in the mail and return that and vote. You can't do that in Mississippi. It's actually the voting process is actually in court in Mississippi in 2 separate lawsuits. We have what you call no excuse early voting, which means, we do not have no excuse early voting.
Right.
You have to have a reason to vote early. And a judge just yesterday ruled that, that if the person has a pre-existing condition that could be made worse by the coronavirus, and they have the right to vote early. That's in the courts right now. It's being appealed. Michael Watson said he wants to appeal it. The Secretary of State says he wants to appeal it to the Supreme Court to get some final and definitive guidelines for this issue. But Mississippi has not done Mississippi is one of the few states that have not taken pretty serious steps to make it easier to vote this November. So you'll see people, there's the likelihood you're going to see long lines November 3rd. The poll workers are going to have on, what do you call it, PPE, the mask and the gloves and all the protective equipment.
Yeah.
And then there's supposed to be a lot of hand sanitizer and other safety precautions. But, a lot of people say it'd just be easier just to allow people to vote by mail or to vote early to eliminate those long lines on election day.
Now, do you think that that's going to affect turnout, or do you think that people are still just going to show up the way we always have to the polls in person?
Geoff, what do you think?
Turnout right now is the big unknown. If you look at, on a national level, I talked with some campaign operative folks in the last few weeks, and their answer to that is we don't know what we don't know. Not only in Mississippi, but all across the board. Are people going to turn out? That is a great unknown. I guess on some level you have to figure some groups or some demographic or whatever. This is the older voters or whatever. You got to figure somewhere down the road this is going to affect turnout negatively, some way or another. But that is totally the unknown turnout. And beyond that, I don't think campaigns have figured out how you reach voters. How do you run a get out the vote operation during a pandemic? You can't do a lot of the typical things, and you can't go glad hand or have big crowds or rallies. So I don't know. What's your guess on turnout, Bobby?
Well, I appreciate everything you said, and all that's correct. But I just think there's so much interest in this election that I just believe the turnout's going to be really big. I think it'll be bigger than it was in 2016, or larger than it was in 2016. And of course, this is I went back just a few minutes ago and looked at the 2018 race, which was in the midterm, where turnout is always lower. The 2018 race between a special election between Mike Espy and Cindy Highsmith, and about 900,000 people voted in that runoff election, which was a huge turnout.
Huge, yeah.
For a midterm election. And I just, typically in Mississippi, more than 1 million people vote in presidential elections, and I think it's going to be around 1.1 or 1.2 million. I just think it's going to be a really big turnout.
Like 08 level, you think?
Yeah, I do. I think, and Mike Espy's counting on that. He's hoping, he believes it's going to be that high, and he's planning on that to help him get over the top this time. I think the odds are against him, but he believes he has a shot, and he's running an aggressive campaign. And so
his shot would be for turnout to be huge, and for a lot of people that. Someone I talked with said he's got to get people out who haven't voted since 08.
Yeah, well, he's got to get people out. In addition to getting people out who hadn't voted since 2008, he's also, in fairness, he's also got to change a lot of minds of voters, particularly in Mississippi. Doesn't have a lot of sort of high-end suburbs like some states do, where all these sort of college-educated suburbs are sort of moving to the Democratic Party right now. Mississippi doesn't have as many of those people, but he's got to be able to attract the ones that we do have in the state, and he has a chance to win. He believes he can do that. He has a formula, but it's I don't know. I can't. I'd have to go back and look. I'm sure there's been some time when an incumbent senator has lost to Mississippi, but I can't. I'm not sure when it would have been like in the 30s or the 40s.
No, they typically resign midterm. Someone gets appointed, and
they're there for another.
And they're there, yeah, forever.
Until they decide to retire midterm.
Typical path, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the Senate race, Geoff, you kind of just mentioned this, but it is a weird year in that, there was no Neshoba County Fair, and you can't rub elbows with people or like meet them as much. I'm wondering,
Sure.
what do both of the candidates' campaigns look like in this year where everything has changed?
Yeah, Adam and I just recently tried to look into that and everything. And one thing Mr. Espy is doing, his campaign is doing a lot of virtual town halls, a lot of meetings like that. Hyde Smith, her campaign is, she's not done a lot of campaign. Her campaign folks have said she's focused on her job. She's being careful given the pandemic restrictions. Most of her appearances are Senate related and not much campaign. So yeah, it's to date it's been a really strange cycle. And like I said, I don't think anyone in the campaign world, be it presidential, you name it, has figured out what the best strategy is. You got some candidates, really, President Trump, for example, really rely on big rallies and stuff like that, and that can't happen now. Social media has played a huge role in elections.
And that's where she is for the most
quite
part,
a few
Geoff.
For quite a few sessions now, but I don't think social media has, in most cases, and especially on a state or local level, been shown. They haven't figured out how to use that as get out the vote. I think get out the vote effort still requires boots on the ground, as they say, knocking on doors, getting people together, getting buses to take people to the polls. And I don't know that anyone's come up with, this election is going to be a testing ground for how do you do a virtual get out the vote, what works and what doesn't. So on a national level, we'll probably see some very interesting experiments on that.
But Geoff,
go ahead.
Yeah,
Bob.
now I was just saying that you talked about social media right now. That's pretty much the extent, to a large extent, the extent of I said extent too many times, excuse me, but it's that's pretty much Cindy Hyde Smith's campaign right now.
Yeah, she's done her 100 accomplishments in 100 days. Yeah, it's been social media oriented, but it's not been social media like a Zoom chat or
right.
Virtual town hall or anything. One thing I can't help but think both candidates in that race have done well. The Espy campaign has done really well in fundraising. For a couple of different quarter cycles, he's outraised her. He's done really well, and she has plenty of cash. I can't help but think that any week now with the election coming up, that surely we're going to see just an absolute bombardment of ads. Because what else can they? They don't have a lot else to spend their money on. There's not going to be the rallies and stuff like that. So surely we're going to see just wall to wall advertising, I would guess.
I think Espy's first ad has come up today, or it's not today. It's coming up anytime.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, guys, it sounds like you're saying that Mike Espy is trying to do things. I think actually this evening he's doing an event, a virtual drive-in or something, but
right.
With Stacey Abrams.
Yeah, that's right, with Stacey Abrams. Cindy Hyde Smith is kind of laying low. Is that something that's working for her, or do you think it's to her detriment?
Again, back to something Adam and I just covered in a couple of stories. As someone I talked with put it, that's a tried and true strategy. If you've got enough of a lead, you've got name recognition, you don't have, otherwise any other great impediment, and you're an incumbent. That is a tried and true strategy. Keep your head down. Don't give your opponent any platform. Something like that. So, we'll see. There's been a lot of argument and bad dueling polls about how much her lead actually is, or how much she can rely on turnout for Trump that would obviously help her. So we'll we'll see. But I mean, it doesn't appear, we're 2 months away, and it doesn't appear that we're going to see perhaps a whole lot of change from her campaign.
But let's
like
not,
I said, I think we'll see lots of TV advertising.
and let's not forget Mississippi is still a pretty solid red state, pretty solid Republican state. So she has a pretty significant built-in advantage. SB has to do sort of the bulk of the work to catch up, if you will.
Yeah.
What does SB have to do to win, or I don't know, to even get it close like the last race? If they're, forgive me if I'm speaking, then maybe they are very close already. I don't know, in the polls.
Well,
again, he's got to have overperforming turnout. That's going to be the name of the game. He's going to have, you know, like we said, 2008 level Democratic turnout. And I don't know, given a couple of issues, you know, would the flag issue perhaps aid that, potential for that?
medical marijuana, maybe.
Medical marijuana, and there's also the other voting change initiative. You know, those all have the potential to help him with that turnout. A presidential race with the first opportunity for many voters to vote for a woman of color for vice president, that has the potential to help him with turnout too. So, I guess both of the campaigns have a good bit riding on what happens on the national level and the presidential level in this as well.
Kayleigh, what he says he's counting on is, he says in 2018, his campaign says that the African-American percentage of the total vote was about 32.5%. He says he needs to increase that by about 3%.
3 point, yeah.
And then in 2018, he says he got about 18% of the votes of white Mississippians. He needs to increase that by 4%. And that's what he says will carry him to victory, which, those numbers may not seem like a lot, but they still could be a pretty tall order to accomplish in November.
Sure.
But that's sort of the equations they're building the campaign on.
The 35% African-American turnout, given some other things breaking his way, could certainly do it, right? If you saw some sort of depressed turnout on the other side, I would think that would put him within striking distance in and of itself.
And another issue that will be different from 2018 is in 2018, President Trump made, I believe, 3 visits to the state to campaign for Cindy Hyde-Smith, including 2 visits on election eve. I mean, right. I just don't see that happening this time because Trump's going to be pretty busy with his own campaign. If he's having to come to Mississippi to campaign, then he's in real trouble.
Either that, or if he comes to Mississippi, you would definitely have to question his strategy.
Yeah, because he's going to be focusing on states like Ohio and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin.
But on the other hand, as I've heard some people say, you know, Hyde-Smith, when he came and visited in 2018, as someone put it, they wanted people to pretend Trump was on the ballot with her. Well, they don't have to pretend this go round. So could see that either way, I guess. But yeah, certainly not having him rally, rallying, I would think was a huge turnout motivator then.
What about the House races? I mean, we have 2 incumbents. Is that a race to watch, or are they going to be close?
No,
they're not expected to be. I think in all 3 of those races, not considered really competitive at all. Am I correct, Bobby?
Yeah, the 4th district, which is the Gulf Coast district, Gulf Coast sort of dominated district. Stephen Palazzo is unopposed, I believe.
Unopposed, yeah.
And then the other 3 incumbents, Benny Thompson in the 2nd district, he's the lone Democrat. Michael Guest in the 3rd District, which is sort of the Jackson and East Mississippi area going over to Meridian. And then Trent Kelly up in the Tupelo area going into DeSoto County, North Mississippi. They have opposition, but the opposition is not well funded and
Or well known. Basically,
I don't want to
no
discourage,
name recognition.
yeah, I don't want to discourage anybody, but their opponents have a long road to hoe, as they say, back in Jones County.
Well, I don't know, guys, if you have something else you want to talk about, go for it. But pretty soon, I guess we can open it up to questions. So guys, if you have any questions who are watching, please type them in the Q&A and I will read them aloud to Bobby and Geoff. But in the meantime, this is your time to wax poetic on the election, Bobby and Geoff.
I thought we were doing that already. I'm just about all out of poetry. I'm excited about this election. I think that it's going to be so unique with those 3 separate ballot proposals: the medical marijuana and the flag, and then the junior electoral college. And then I've been covering politics for a long time. I think SB is a long shot, but I do think that this is a competitive Senate race, and we don't have many of those here in Mississippi. Usually the incumbent runs unopposed or with not much opposition at all. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the presidential race. So I think it's going to be a sort of fun time to cover politics in Mississippi over the next 2 months.
What about you, Geoff?
Oh, yes. Sorry. I was reading something real quick. I agree, although I heard someone say the other day they would really like to have some charted waters and some precedented times these days, but this is certainly not that. And I'm curious to see, the whole pandemic obviously is a watershed moment of some sort, but for politics and campaigning, to me, this is going to be a demarcation of some sort. We're going to see exactly how the movement into the social media age and new media age is going to work as far as campaigns. I don't think we're ever going to see things go really back to normal, so to speak, in every facet of everything we're looking at. But I think campaigning in politics, we're about to see a sea change, and I'm just curious to witness that history and see how it shakes out. Smart people will figure out how to campaign and get out votes during times like this, but I don't think they have yet. So I'm curious to see what they come up with and how that changes things in the future.
Well, we have one question so far, and you guys kind of addressed it when we were talking about medical marijuana, but they want you to address the dangers of the marijuana amendment. I guess in that, could you just talk a little bit more about the people who seem opposed to either option, legislative or citizen sponsored? Like what?
I can, if you'd like, I got a really good earful the other day from some opponents of the citizen initiative, and I mean, there's been a lot out there. There's been actually an organized campaign with that, but some of the things they said were that, okay, this, as it's written, it just leaves too many things wide open. It gives a vague definition of what a dispensary is. Mm-hmm. So a dispensary is going to end up being any number of things. According to them, it could be just somebody growing some plants in their basement and hanging up a shingle saying they're a dispensary. It appears, according to them, to thwart, or it would cause issues with cities not being able to zone it. Let's say a city has zoning that allows XYZ in this area, doesn't allow stuff in this area. Apparently this as it's written, if it were passed, would circumvent local zoning. So you couldn't prevent a dispensary from being near, who knows what, kindergarten or church or something like that. One interesting thing point they made that I thought was that we've seen across the country medical marijuana, because banking doesn't want to get involved because of the federal issues, that even on the medical end, it's a cash only business. Your insurance company is going to pay for it. It's going to require a lot of cash. And as they were saying, the Department of Health is going to have to, get some armored trucks and a big safe. Literally, potentially millions of dollars in cash they're going to have to deal with. And again, the setup is however much the Department of Health collects, they have to use that money to run the program. But if it makes more than that, and it probably will, they can't turn it in to the government or to taxpayers. They have to keep it in an account, and it can only be used for the medical marijuana program. So we could end up with, $200 million in a bank account just sitting there, or in a vault in cash. Supposedly just lots of little things like that.
For a long time, but we are starting to get some more questions. So
okay, cool.
Jump ahead. So one is, will Michael Watson, Secretary of State's appeal go through the system before the November election, or will the judge's ruling hold for the election?
No, he filed an appeal, and I'd be surprised if the Supreme Court does not weigh in the next month or so, or even a shorter period of time. I do think, and Watson filed an appeal, and the group that filed the original lawsuit, trying to make it easier to vote in Mississippi, has filed a cross appeal. So, I fully expect the state Supreme Court to rule in the next several weeks before the election. Now, and don't forget, I don't think I addressed this a while ago, but there's also a separate lawsuit sort of addressing a lot of the same issues as in federal court. So there's all sorts of stuff going on right now in terms of voter access in Mississippi. So we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Okay. Our next question is, if the flag is voted down, could the legislature revise the process, maybe having the commission choose 2 finalists for voters to choose? And do you think that the group trying to bring the old flag back has a chance to get on the ballot?
The first part of that, this is a legislative law or whatever. So yeah, they can change
the law.
Come back and change the law, do anything they want. And actually, the commission this week, as it was set to, as it had to make a final choice, a lot of the commissioners were lamenting that they didn't have 2 choices to put before voters. So if it doesn't pass this go around, that would be very likely.
Yeah, and as far as the initiative, there's only been 3, 4, 5 or 6 initiatives ever to make the ballot. It's a tough process. Takes a lot of work. So I'm not saying they can't do it, but it's going to be it's a long and complicated process. The legislature made it like that for a reason, because they didn't actually want the citizens to be voting on changing the Constitution. So those folks have a long road in front of them to get it done. And the earliest, the earliest it can be on the ballot, I think, is, this may end up in court. There's some people think it's be done in 2022, and I'm not an attorney, but I didn't stay in the Holiday Inn Express last night either. But the way I read the Constitution, I think the earliest it could be on the ballot would be 2023. If they did get the required numbers of signatures.
Okay. This next question goes back to someone said there's a concern that President Trump will refute the election results should Biden win. Even in a predictably red state, are our officials willing to defend the accuracy of results? And along those same lines, someone else said, have you heard anything from the Secretary of State about having his people at the polls this year to ensure election integrity?
The last question first. I think I saw a notice recently, but typically he has Secretary of State's office has poll watchers out. I want to say they're required to have them at some percentage of polls every year. As far as Trump, someone not leaving office, I mean, look, our nation has seen a peaceful transition of power throughout its history. I think we'll see that again. I know that's a big issue being talked about. It's not something I'm going to stay up at night worrying about at this point.
This would actually be an issue more for our federal official, and I would hope that Roger Wicker and Cindy Hyde-Smith or Mike Espy, depending on who's elected, would definitely rise to the occasion and voice support for democracy as it's set up in our Constitution, the electoral process, rise to the occasion and support that effort being followed.
Someone else said, I've noticed over the last few days that Cindy Hyde-Smith and the governor have been referring to COVID-19 as the China virus, as has Trump. Is this a campaign tactic, and what do you think of it?
This is
it is the first campaign
yeah,
tactic.
this is national politicization. I have trouble saying that word, of issues. Yeah, I mean, that's totally raw red meat politics. That's what that is. I think everyone can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, next question is, about someone who's watching on Facebook wants to know your thoughts about voting online.
I mean, we do all sorts of stuff online. We pay our bills, do banking online. So, I think it could be set up to be done safely, but we can't even get mail-in voting in Mississippi. I know it's keep mail-in voting, so don't hold your breath.
Yeah.
I think that's one of those things. It's an issue of when, not if. Like Bobby said, I mean, you do your banking online or whatever, but I'll make a prediction that Mississippi would be one of the last states to transition to online voting. I'm just going to go out on a limb.
Yeah.
How long did we fight motor voter?
Yeah, that's a pretty strong limb you're on, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Another question from Facebook. Bobby and Geoff, as political veterans of Mississippi politics, do you see any avenue open to the Democratic Party to gain equilibrium with the Republican Party, let alone gain the majority again? Is it possible? What will the Democrats have to do to achieve that?
I think one thing we're seeing, again, in a lot of ways, I mean, we're a rural state, low population state, so we're not out on the forefront of a lot of social or demographic change, but we are seeing some change on a national level, as Bobby mentioned, with suburban areas and everything. And, those changes, I think are potential to happen here as well. If the Republican Party, in my opinion, if they don't find a way to, like they tried to do or successfully did in the early 90s, if they don't find a way to open their tent and expand, I think potential to see a shift everywhere, even in red Mississippi. How long that takes or whatever, but I mean, throughout history, we've seen such things are cyclical, as former Senator Tommy Robertson would say, Bobby, the pendulum might turn. But we're still a very red state. We've seen that, but certainly there are pathways and there are demographic and social changes going on all over the country that, Mississippi's not an island. So I think you could still see some shifting in that direction.
Yeah, one reason this campaign, the Senate campaign, is exciting is because Espy is kind of running as a different type of Democrat. He's running as a sort of more of a national Democrat than a Mississippi Democrat. He's embracing the national party. And his belief is that there's people out there who haven't voted, who have, you know, just felt that the Democrat has been just kind of a little bit less conservative version of the Republican. And so he's running, embracing Joe Biden, embracing, you know, he's welcoming National Democrats to come to the state, National Democrats like Stacey Abrams to campaign for him. So this is going to be an enlightening election, and to see how SB does using that strategy. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that turns out. You know, that may be is that going to be a new path for Democrats? We'll have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm. It looks like our last question is, have there been any polls on the possible adoption of a new state flag? I know there's a group pushing against the adoption of a new flag, but is there anyone who plans the adoption?
Is there anyone who, you broke up for a second, Kayleigh?
Yeah.
They were saying, is there anyone who plans to promote the adoption of a new flag? But has there been any polling on the flag options? I think we've written about that.
Not any scientific polling. There was some polling there was some polling early on replacing the old flag, and there was surprisingly some strong support for replacing the old flag. But as far as polling on this new flag, I don't think it's not been done yet. But I do think there'll be groups formed that will try to promote passage of that new flag. I think it's better for Mississippi to go ahead and get this behind us. Go ahead and get a new flag adopted, and I think that will be to the benefit of the state moving forward.
Kayleigh, I think one thing I've seen in recent days, it's either MEC or an affiliated group, I think is planning to do probably a coordinated campaign. Also, the Flag Commission voted yesterday, after it adopted a flag, to approve the Department of Archives and History to do a voter education campaign. Archives clearly stated that it's not going to be an advocacy campaign, but they're going to do a documentary that the Godwin Group is going to put together, and they're going to use excerpts of that for a voter education campaign. So I think we will. I think we'll see, the groups that came together and lobbied to get this changed, be it the business world, sports world, whatever. I mean, I think some of those groups are going to come back out to make sure and try and get this passed as well. But I know, actually, I thought I had it in front of me, but I know Business Group just announced, may have even been today, that they're going to formally have a campaign for this.
And our last question is one more flag question. I promise this is actually the last question. Does the flag vote require just 51%?
Yes.
It requires less than 51%. It requires.
Yeah, it's right. A majority of the votes cast.
It could be one more than the other side.
Yeah, it's just straight up or down, approve or disapprove. So.
Okay. Well, with that, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, and I just wanted to let you guys know that we offer, to keep you guys in the loop, several newsletters, which you can find on our website to subscribe. You probably find out about this event through a newsletter, but you can follow us on Twitter. Bobby and Geoff are also both active on Twitter if you ever want to ask them questions directly. Sorry guys, I just threw you guys out there.
Oh, yeah.
And you can reach us, our emails are on the website. So thank you again so much for coming tonight, and we hope this has helped you. So have a great evening.